So just real quickly, I'm very happy to have Craig here. I know you all know Craig, but I just wanted to mention Craig is the has now Sihan is the immediate past chair of the Committee on Adaptation to a Changing Climate. Craig is the current chair of the Committee on Adaptation to a Changing Climate. So that means I'm just like emeritus past chair of the Committee on Adaptation to a Changing Climate. So with that, I'll pass it to Craig.
Okay, what one of you mentioned the need for broad dissemination. I'm going to talk about broad dissemination. That might be my topic. I'm in a very brief presentation. I'm going to talk about who needs to be informed on a broad profession-wide basis, what type of information they need, and how we might begin to provide that information. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about who civil engineers are and what they do. In the US, there are a few more than 500,000 professional engineers. Of those, about 2/3 of them are civil or environmental, based on NCAES exams. That goes up and down by a few percentage every year and every decade, but it's been relatively steady for a long time. Of the civil and environmental engineers, about 25% are structural. It's somewhere in the 20s based on the examinations that people choose to take. And there's some overlap, but that's a broad approximation. It's not far off. And that means that 75% of civil engineers are general civil, transportation, environmental, geotechnical, construction, and the general civils are often a combination of the next four. And there are some other sub-disciplines within that. Of civil engineers, almost 25% of them are employed by public entities. That's data somewhat dated from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Of those, about 3% are federal, low teens percent are state agencies. The vast majority are local government, large and small. Every municipality across America has some access to public representation by civil engineers. In consulting firms, there's not great data, and it's changing over time, but about half work for large firms that are getting larger over time, and about half work for small and mid-sized firms. Right now, with respect to climate resilience, there are niche practice groups within large firms, and there are niche practice groups within small firms, but both of them are relatively small niches to date, small groups that are well versed in climate resilience. In total, there are about 400,000 civil and environmental engineers who are licensed or in process in undergraduate education, graduate education, and engineer interns. They are predominantly incredibly busy. Most of them have no more time in any given week to do anything more than they're doing, and that will likely be that way with respect to where the market is until the day they retire. Most of them, the vast majority of them, don't go to national conferences. They don't read journal papers. They are busy in practice. They're smart, but they're generally uninformed regarding um, climate resilience. All of them need to be informed. It's at different levels for different people and in different roles. The level of detail varies quite considerably, but all of them need a basic understanding of non-stationarity and in the application of metrics with respect to climate change. Next slide, please. What type of information is needed? National and international standards would be great. And the structural standards that Jennifer has been describing, that is ASCE's purview. It has been for a long time. It has a mechanism to go into codes through the IBC and into municipalities in that route. We are ahead of the game on that, in my view, in my observation. We're in a step-by-step approach. We will probably be in a step-by-step approach for decades, but we have started. Other subdisciplines, the regulatory requirements are not based on national standards. We do not have on the civil, transportation, environmental side similar standards, similar to ASCE 7 and ASCE 24, and a couple of other structural standards that are widely used, widely distributed, widely required by municipalities. That's not the case. And yes, it allows more leeway, but it also leaves clients without something that they need to comply with. It leaves engineers with the decision on their part as to what is appropriate in design. I have listed here 3 levels of information that they need. The first is tools and design calculation input. By tools, I'm referring, and I'm a civil and environmental engineer, so I'm a water and wastewater engineer from the get-go many decades ago. So I come at it from that perspective regularly. The tools, the type of tools I'm referring to are sea level rise projections, Atlas 15, Volume 2, which is going to be transformative in the civil engineering profession, the temperature tool that's being worked on, and how to insert that in design calculations. It's a little bit easier with the descriptive nature of structural design standards. It's a little bit easier there. It's a little bit harder to finalize in most other areas of civil engineering. It's actually harder in structural down the road as well. So that's the first part. That's the relatively easy part. We can disseminate, we haven't started yet, but we can disseminate what we know to date. The hard part are the design implications. And the last NIST workshop I thought was great. All of those water presentations were of great interest to me, and they showed how difficult it is to decide on any given project how to apply those tools. And it's going to vary. It's going to apply to projects of all types, of all sizes. It's not true that small projects don't need consideration of future changes, because small floods damage buildings and large floods damage buildings. And we've learned that half flood damages are pluvial and not fluvial. We're flooding a lot of roadways, I believe. Um, Coming up with that decision-making process requires a general understanding of the uncertainty and the trends. And we have to date moving targets. I think we can rest assured that 10 years, 20 years down the road, our moving targets will have moved. So our moving targets will be moving targets in the future. And engineers making those decisions, like the projects that were discussed at the last NIST meeting, need to understand that range of uncertainty in order to make good decisions. It's both public engineers working for municipalities and design engineers. Both of them need that understanding. Examples in general civil engineering are precipitation, sea level rise, to a little bit lesser extent, temperature and wind, but they're important, and there are others. Precipitation, it's both IDF on the high side and drought in some sub areas of civil engineering. And sea level rise, it's protection, urban stormwater, where that has a major impact, and groundwater, which has effects far from tidewater throughout all three coasts of the United States. Next slide, please. How can we provide that information? I would submit that we have not yet begun. We've begun with ASCE 7. We have not yet started much otherwise in terms of broad dissemination to those 400,000 engineers. We have the federal climate science community and the research community likely available to assist. We need to enlist their support in helping to disseminate that information in understandable fashions. This is relatively unique in my experience in the engineering profession in the last 50 years, that something this broad and this detailed needs to get communicated anew to that many practicing engineers. In terms of what ASCE has done in the past, to me, it is similar but different to what has been done regarding sustainability, where we have a series of webinars and seminars of various hours duration regarding the 8 different components of sustainability, one of which is climate resilience. And we have a certification in that, ENVSP, where ASCE has reached out to other organizations, ACEC, and on the public side, APWA, to further those certifications. And there's a series of seminars and webinars that people can get broad information on how to incorporate sustainability into engineering practice. I submit that something similar is needed for the various areas of climate resilience, to get information in understandable fashions regarding the science, the tools, the application in projects of various sorts, the application in all sorts of projects is the real challenge here, will be the real challenge for a long time. And I've also questioned whether it might be wise to have a separate climate resiliency certificate program similar to ENVSP, where folks would go through rather detailed, rigorous technical regimen to understand the science and the tools and the application, and have something to show for that they have been through that. All of that still gets some number of people. It's maybe tens of thousands. Those day-long and days-long seminars aren't going to be likely attended by hundreds of thousands of people. The Committee on Adaptation to a Changing Climate has started, and these are new, preparing climate adaptation engineering bulletins, which are brief, peer-reviewed, readable, understandable, 800 plus or minus word technical bulletins on individual topics. And we have begun the process of distributing those by publicizing them in the source. And that just started, and we had about 1,000 people visit the first article, which was on sea level rise in the last 2 weeks. We're also having them distributed by other engineering organizations. The American Academy of Environmental Engineers and Scientists has agreed we're going to be publishing these every 6 weeks, new topics every 6 weeks or so. As we're starting out here, there will be no shortage of topics. The AEES is distributing it by email to all of their members. NSPE is in the process of considering distributing these bulletins to all of their members through a daily designs mechanism that they have that goes out in emails to everyone. And we've had the thought of reaching out to APWA and seeing if there's a mechanism there to get this kind of digestible but technically solid information into the hands as to as many people as we can in the profession. And each of these articles is intended, leading horses to drink, to have embedded in them links to far more robust technical information so that people get a brief summary, get into these 800 plus word articles, and then go from there to robust technical resources such as this first one on the federal information base on sea level rise. So that's in process. I think the need to educate engineers goes across all of our institutes. And there aren't many things that go across all of our institutes. And it's a challenge to do that, I think. But I don't think this is going to be done separately for transportation and water resources and COPRI and SEI, although SEI is going to have has to have their own format for what's needed for the code related standards. There has been discussion often within ASCE of why can't we have codes and standards for general civil engineering? I think that goes back 75 or 100 years. These standards exist in a gazillion different places. Almost none of them reflect non-stationarity to date. And almost none of them refer back to national standards. So I suspect that flexibility that one of you described earlier, that boy, it's lucky that general civil engineers don't have as much prescriptions here. I think that's probably likely to continue. If ASCE could be successful in establishing national standards, for instance, on rainfall runoff, stormwater design, drainage design, I think that would have to be with a public partner that would confirm the format of it and be able, like IBC, to get it into municipal standards. And we're a long way from that. That might be a long-term goal, but we can't simply write standards and just assume that everybody in the country will adopt them, because they haven't to date. That's my presentation for today. So
found my mute button. All right, so I see Robin's got her hands up. Great comments, Craig. I'm sure it'll elicit some discussion. We've got time. So Robin, let's start with you.
So I just want to share an experience I had 2 weeks ago, which ties right into what Craig was saying. I had the opportunity to give a presentation, believe it or not, at the New Jersey Flood Association of Floodplain Management. Okay, so they're all in this field, right? And with New Jersey, there's coastal and then there's pluvial and all that. And before my presentation, I was sitting in some of the sessions. And one of them was talking about, it was from the consultants. I think it was in New York City, but it was definitely sea level rise and flooding and how to set elevations and all sorts of things like that. All right. And so then they kept talking about fluvial flooding, fluvial. So I raised my hand, shy little me, and say, because I quoted what we had in our presentation about 90% of Zurich's experience of flooding and 50% of the cost, 90% of the occasions and 50% are outside of the fluvial flooding. It's a huge thing, pluvial. And the first thing was, and it really shocked me. This person goes, "What's pluvial flooding?" And I wasn't fast enough. Then there was somebody next to me who was saying, "Well, that's where it's, the rain, And I say, how can you set these things when you don't look at the whole picture? So I was really shocked about that. And I haven't been able to bring it back internally yet because I've been on the road. But that just shows one little insight into what's not out there and what knowledge is not out there. So I just wanted to share. Thanks.
No, that's great, Robin. Other comments, reactions to Craig? I talk to Craig on a regular basis, so he knows all my questions. So
yeah, I think that's a great list, Craig. I agree with you about this whole issue of non-stationarity, how to deal with that for practicing engineers. I think there needs to be some training on that. Sometimes, as you know, the natural variability could come across as, a trend, and how to deal with that type of situation, I think is important for engineers. The other topic is, and I'm hoping Atlas 15 will address what happens at a sub-daily time scale for rainfall. Because you look at all these floods across the globe, I don't think we have enough information on sub-daily intensification with the warming. They basically extrapolates back to sub-daily. I think there needs to be better information on that.
Yep, good point. I've got Shirley, Norma Jean, and then Brian. So Shirley.
I think NJ was first. But Norma Jean was first.
Okay, I believe you. Go ahead, Norma Jean.
So Craig, this is more on your bulletins. So, are you thinking about tying them into a collection, and then how are you disseminating them? Because if you start if they become really useful to the practitioner, I can see that these can actually instigate some of that work that you wish would start on getting the horizontal infrastructure, giving a standard, and tying it to a public agency that can then provide that legitimacy, but also that requirement.
That's an excellent comment, and we have not figured that out yet. It took us a year working within ASCE to find a mechanism to get information sent out to everybody, and it was through the source. It took us a long time. We don't yet have the individual articles are in the collaborate section of the ASCE website, and I describe them as being there, hiding, not in plain sight. They are hard to find. We have not yet been successful in search optimization, in getting Google to recognize them and pull them up with respect to certain keywords. I don't think most of the professional societies don't have mechanisms to get detailed technical information out to everybody. It's not what we normally do. And I think this situation demands that we do that. And I think we're in step one of figuring out how to get that out to everybody, recognized to everybody, and get them to spend the 15 minutes it takes to read that, and then know where to go to get it when they need it in the future. We're just trying to figure that out, and your questions are spot on.
Yeah, I guess I'll just going to weigh in here a little bit. A version of the sea level rise discussion was on Collaborate for 6 months, 8 months. And I think it had 35 reads, probably half of which were Craig and I just kind of going and looking at it or whatever. It came out, it was advertised through the source, and within a week it had 900. So, we think we're kind of on the right track, but, we've got some more work to do. Shirley and Brian.
Sure. Pardon me. And Craig and I've had these talks also. And we both definitely agree about there is a huge need to disseminate this past ASCE. I'm going to hop on my soapbox right here and say I put a couple things in the chat. One is that, first of all, particularly our younger engineers don't read. Two things. One, young people don't read. Trust me, we've tried with textbooks. That doesn't work. It doesn't work with a lot of other things. So here comes the problem with that 800 words. Their bosses might read it, but we've got to accompany it with video. Whether it's webinars, whether it's short video clips, we've got to do that. The second one is that those who've heard me in other meetings, this is my big one. We have not yet really invested in figuring out how to displace textbooks by McGraw-Hill with useful current information from ASCE in classes. So we have a generation of students who are not reaching for ASCE for design information. That's the next one. Number 3, and what am I, 3 or 4? Dan, you're counting for me. No, I'm in Pennsylvania. We probably have several thousand of the engineers that Craig mentioned, and he's absolutely right. The 400,000. Their statement is, I don't care until it shows up in a design manual. So now we've got to get to the design manuals, and some of that is coming down to the legislature. So I put in the chat about what do we need to do to get information out to the state legislative fly-ins. It's not just the national. The national and the horizontal infrastructure usually isn't regulated at the national level. It really is the state level. How do we push this information out so they have an infographic or something they can take with them to meet with their state legislatures, who would be the ones who would change regulation. And also have it handy when they're talking to their municipalities and when they're talking to their state regulators. So, thinking a little less even in 800 words and thinking about what are the summary infographics we can get out there that are picked up. And then, so again, you got to bring people in who know what they're doing. Again, we got to get it to we've got to get this in front of, when I present, I get a lot of interest from students around climate. If I can, I can teach this stuff, but a lot of faculty can't teach it. And so it's that side of it. So it's the teaching, it's the new students, we need multiple ways to distribute this. And we need to get it in front of those who are actually controlling what's going on. Because if my state puts in the manual, and Rob has actually put it in there, and almost going to survive public comment, Rob Traver did ours, recent update. If that survives public comment, engineers will figure it out. Then they'll go look for the 800 words. But until then, they're pulling their design calculations out of the state manual, which means we've got to get it into the state manuals. And that's going to require going through a different group of partner organizations to be thinking about that. So I think that I'll get off my soapbox and turn it over to Brian.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Shirley. Comments always welcome. You can always bring a soapbox to these meetings.
I
Brian.
usually bring 3 or 4.
So Shirley, I share your point of view, having regular conversations with you and Dan on this topic and how we can make sure that we've got better collaboration. Craig, I'm thrilled to hear you open in the way that you did, that this is a cross-cutting topic that is ripe for collaboration within ASCE.
Yeah.
And being a part of the collaboration innovation team, and Shirley being on the team as well. This is the kind of recommendation that they need so that we can begin acting on recommendations that are being made to the ASCE board. Technical Regional Board of Directors is also another avenue. But related to the bulletins that you all have placed on Collaborate, I have taken some time to look at each and every one of them. And it's unfortunate that it's not more widely disseminated. So I did begin speaking behind the scenes with parts of our senior leadership team, specifically with those that might be responsible for complementary e-learning programs that can be delivered to our members. But the good news, and Shirley, again, I agree, and we have now begun to fill the gap with the right staff resources. We have someone available who can produce digital content, a young man who recently graduated from NYU. And those bulletins specifically during our staff retreat have been lined up. You all will be contacted so that we can develop short duration videos that align with the attention span of the next generation, my generation as well, so that we can begin finding ways to creatively get and deliver this content in ways that our members are preferring to receive such content, and then to also accompany that with links to or ways of making access to those bulletins. It could be that a series of bulletins would result not just from CACC but from other communities. And the other piece, and I don't mean to take up too much of the time, Dan, is beyond those releases and releases through social media, including LinkedIn and other places, there's another community that's keenly interested in what's happening in the United States. I just came back from my other title here at ASCE is I'm responsible for global federations. We hosted the ASCE, ICE, CSCE triennial. Those are our regular collaborators. But there's a much broader community. Guna Gunalan was just elected to be president of the World Federation of Engineering Organizations. And I had an opportunity to go with him to their General Assembly. There are so many opportunities for us to engage with their committees, Committee on Disaster Risk Management, the Water Committee, infrastructure committees. And they are actually, having met with many international delegations, turning to the U.S. in search of what we're doing. How are we providing this kind of information so that it gets into practice? And in absence of that, that's one group. The Asian Civil Engineering Coordinating Council just hosted their civil engineering conference in the Asian region. Marcia Anderson Bomar, of course, was one of the keynote speakers and spoke to some of the examples of what's happening in the US. And I do know that the 17 member organizations would very much welcome engaging in a dialogue with ASCE NOAA Task Force to learn more about the relationship that's been established between our authoritative climate and weather data sources, and to see if they might be able to model some of what we're doing. USGS and NOAA data are a mainstay in their engineering practice. So there are other engineering communities that we have AOCs with, agreements of cooperation. That might be another outlet. I think that now that we are more aware and our senior leadership is more aware of these bulletins, I think we can begin collaborating with staff to expose them and maybe get feedback about what the needs are from not just the American, but even the global community.
Excellent. Excellent. Comments or questions for Brian? All right. Well, I think this is all good news. I mean, there's a lot of work to do, but I can see that we're making progress in having a more coherent approach across the society, which I think is like super good.